It is showtime. Oh, Candy almost spilled my coffee. Good evening and welcome to the live stream. Gordon Causey, as it always is, and equally as it always is, here is Candy, the Wonder Dog. As I fix my color, and she jumps all over me. I see that Danny and Sharunian have already shown up. Good to see you both. Gosh, Candy, shake, lady, speak. All right, come on up. Show your pretty face. There we go. Candy the Wonder Dog has been taken care of. Fix the backdrop a little as best I can. Oh, where are we? It is now Saturday, the 10th of May, 2025, 9:31 now. I started pretty much right on time. Trying to get better at that. Especially if I put it in the subject line that I'm starting at 9:30, I want to start on time if I can. But life gets busy. In a recent video, I used a frequent tagline, something of a branding statement almost for my station. I call this my miserable, pathetic little YouTube station. And Danny took exception, said, don't call it miserable and pathetic. It's, what did you say, raw and real. And that is ultimately what I'm aiming for. I want this to be authentic. I don't want this to be lipstick on a pig. I just want it to be, it is what it is. And these are the thoughts, views, and opinions of an old 58-year-old, soon to be 59, not far away now. Born 1966, Canadian, born and bred. And I see, man, I've got 10 people watching. That is a rarity for my station to have that many right at the start. Typically, it takes time to build up, and I'll get up to 30, 40, 50 at times, depending on the subject matter. And I don't think there's anything more compelling right now than the contrast between American President Donald J. Trump and Canada's newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney. And I did a video 4 or 5 days ago in the wake of that meeting that took place in the White House. And I was critical of Mark Carney's performance in that exchange. And man, oh man, more comments than I am used to seeing in my videos. That was not a live video that I did. That was something I scripted out and shared to my Facebook timeline. And then I simply read the text of what I had written. And my opinion hasn't changed. I still think Mark Carney basically pulled the elbows in, was very diplomatic, very deferential, very polite, all typical Canadian. That's what we're like, unless we're on the hockey rink. When we get onto the hockey rink, then we get our elbows up and we swing the elbows, get in front of the net, we fight for the puck. We're passionate in the hockey arena, on the ice. But in the political arena, and especially on the international stage, we're elbows in. And Mark Carney certainly pulled his elbows in. Trump was Trump. I thought for the most part, Trump was somewhat restrained, with one exception being when he trashed over Chrystia Freeland. And there's a reason why liberals did not pick a woman to lead their party. They did not want Chrystia Freeland. They don't believe in DEI when it comes to their performance. If Chrystia Freeland will never know, it's a moot point, MOOT, we'll never know. But I think it's a widely held opinion that had Chrystia Freeland been leading the Liberal Party of Canada, we would have been decimated. They would have been decimated. We would have never picked Chrystia Freeland to be Prime Minister of this country. And so, man, oh man, and I like what Danny's writing, and I'm going to try and remember to do this now, and that is to populate comments to the screen. Danny's writing DEI equals die. And I'm willing at points to put some water in my conservative wine, even around DEI. because I'm not so blind as to ignore the fact that there are elements of racism that continue to exist, certainly in the United States, but also in Canada. And there have been individuals highly qualified who have been passed over for positions simply because of prejudicial views. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't happen. The question is, do you make things better or worse when you implement quota systems and basically engage in what is typically referred to as identity politics? Well, what group do you belong to? We are looking for an Aboriginal disabled female with a homosexual orientation. Otherwise, you don't apply. That is equally as bad to saying anyone of color don't apply, or as was said back in the day when some of my ancestors came over to Canada, Irish need not apply. That used to be uh, uh, a statement. That used to be a sign that was put up in Toronto places of employment. Irish need not apply. Prejudice is old. It's as old as human history. We are humanity by default. We are tribal in nature, tribalistic, and we'll ignore all the flaws of our own tribe while poking at the flaws of another tribe, and that manifests itself in our political discourse as well. But I wanted to get a little more on. Let's see what Danny's writing. He's writing that DI pilot hires are wrong and flat out dangerous. Never uh, seen as many. Well, this DI thing has been around since Obama. I did some reading on it in the wake of that. There were like three aircraft crashes that happened in very short order, one after the other. The first one being the one where the plane crashed, a plane and a helicopter crashed and landed in the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. That was the first one. Then there was that other one, a medevac Lear jet in Philadelphia that went down, looked like a rocket, looked like a missile landing somewhere in a suburban area of Philadelphia. Then there was another one in where Alaska. Someone crash landed onto sea ice, everyone killed. And then, of course, we had that plane in Toronto that flipped over onto its back. And accidents do happen. Would it have made a difference to based on who was behind the controls of those airplanes? From everything I hear, that plane crash that happened over the Potomac River in Washington, it was I think we're going to find out that the individuals at fault were the helicopter pilots, but um, and then what's Danny going on to say? That he's speaking of ground accidents and takeoff and landing near misses and hits. Obviously there needs to be qualifications and standards that have to be met, irrespective of melanin or sexual orientation or gender identification. I can't believe that's a thing, but it is in today's world. And you talk about contrast. In the United States, they're moving away from it. And it looks to me like in Canada, we're fully embracing this. We're going in two entirely different directions, our two countries. And when I saw Mark Carney go down to Washington, what I basically saw him doing is doing everything he can to ensure that Canadian business, that our marketplaces are integrated. He wants to continue with status quo. And he was willing to bend the knee and be deferential, conciliatory, polite, being a typical Canadian, pulling his elbows in, and uh, it would have been a shock. It would have been a shock, and I'm sure a lot of Canadians would have cheered. His rhetoric during the campaign was all about forging new relationships with forging other partnerships internationally to give Canadian goods and services and products access to foreign markets other than the United States. We're so dependent on our American neighbors. They have an economy more than 10 times bigger than our own. And so our economic survival is very much tied to having access to the American marketplace. Um, anyway, and Danny's talking about the ground, the near misses and everything going like that on in that nature in our skies over the last 2 to 3 years. I don't fly a lot. Before COVID, I used to go down to Cuba, maybe down to Panama, then down to Dominican, that kind of thing. But since COVID hit, since they told me I couldn't get onto an airplane because I refused the you know what, I'm kind of not that interested in traveling as much as I used to be. And I like what Danny is writing here. Jesus is King. Everyone who's been on my station before knows that I am a professing Christian, unapologetic. Jesus is Lord. I should be at church tomorrow, so you need to feed your soul, especially in today's world with so many things being uncertain. I'm looking at the United States and I'm looking at Canada. And as I say, I see our two countries, moving in entirely different directions in all manner of ways, not just about DEI, about energy development. We have Donald Trump in the US saying, drill, baby, drill. And we have Mark Carney in Canada who thinks that little tiny Canada with an economy that is a pipsqueak on the world stage. You compare our economy and the size of it compared to China, United States, India. We're so small. We have such a small little economy and we have such a small population, and we think that we're going to lead the charge. I remember years ago, and it was probably back in around before 2010 anyway, when the rhetoric seemed to be that the world was going to be transitioning away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy, the so-called green technology that was going to overtake the world, and that Canada and Ontario, that we would be left behind if we didn't embrace this new paradigm. And if we didn't go green, we were going to be left behind. And so, that's when we started seeing these windmills popping up all over the place like dandelions, and solar panels covering fields now. They're not far from my house. There's a big field filled with solar panels. And what used to be agricultural land is now land designed to harvest the solar power from the sun and to drive electricity generation that way. And is that the way the world's going? Well, I was just reading an article in a publication called Power Mag talking about India's ever increasing levels of coal fired hydroelectric generation. They're burning coal more and more each year. It's growing something like 8% per year, and is expected to be growing at that rate for a number of years to come. They didn't specify exactly how many. And then the article equally noted that China likewise is burning more and more coal. Meanwhile, and coal is cheap fuel source, while we in the Western world, we're relying on the wind blowing and on the sun shining. If the sun goes down, when the sun goes down, and if the wind isn't blowing, what's going to happen to our electricity grid? Is it going to have enough power? Especially if we're all plugging in cars at night. What if when the sun's down and the wind isn't blowing, what are we going to do? Are we going to have to fire up coal fire generation to meet the demand of our going on our electricity grid? It's crazy. And Shrunyan's writing, and that's what I call Pathman construction, because Shrunyan keeps changing his name. One of his names is Shrunyan. Shrunyan Allegiance, I think it was called. Proud Canadian of Sri Lankan descent. I've never asked if you're Tamil or Sinhalese. Those are the two principal language cultural groups in Trinidad, in Sri Lanka. There's the Tamils and the Sinhalese. Anyway, here's what Danny's writing. Even if we get to net zero here in Canada, it won't make a lick of difference in the greater scheme of things. It's all brown sugar. Polite way of saying another word, I think. Even if Canada does achieve this nirvana of net zero with India, China burning coal, with Donald Trump in the US embarking on his drill, baby, drill campaign, what's going to happen is we're just going to be poor. We're going to tax the heck out of carbon, and we're going to add, cost you more when you go to the fuel pump, cost you more when you get your hydro bill, your gas bill, your oil bill. If you heat with oil, your cost of living is going to be going way, way up. While in other countries, their costs are going to be much lower. They're going to have access to cheap energy. And ultimately, cheap energy is what drives an economy. And I'm expecting Carney Trump is talking about, I don't know that he's achieving it, but he's at least talking about making life more affordable for Canadians. Whereas Mark Carney is talking about sacrifice. Canadians are going to be asked to sacrifice, continue to sacrifice. We've been sacrificing during the last 10 years. Carney's was advising the Trudeau Liberals, senior economic advisor to the Trudeau Liberals, heaping on carbon taxation, making life more unaffordable, but it's a needed sacrifice to save the planet from climate change. He's even talked, he has framed it as we need to stabilize the climate. And I am not hopeful for the political future of my home and native land, Canada. What have we got? Airworks is here and is writing, just read that the Liberals now have 170 seats to a recount in Quebec. Heartbreaking. They are now only two shy of majority. I am so demoralized. There were, as I understand it, 4 mandatory judicial recounts, and they were being done over the course of a number of days. And even when it was 3 or 4 shy of a majority, I viewed it as pretty much a majority anyway. So 170, that's just 2, I believe. 172 is what was needed for a majority. So now they're only 2 away. And I think there are 3 more recounts to come. At the end of the day, it will not surprise me if they end up with a bare minimum majority. If they get 2 of those 3 seats to flip, I was reading an article about one in Windsor where they're reporting that a number of rejected ballots had people putting a check mark next to the name of the Liberal candidate, as well as next in the circle. In that case, the voter's intention is clear, and that is the Elections Canada stipulates, and I know this from my time as a scrutineer. What you want to know is, what was the intention of the person marking the ballot? What was their intention in voting? Did they want the Liberal? Or if there's some ambiguity, and if it's ambiguity, I hate that word. If it's ambiguous, were they voting Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Green? We're not really sure. Well, fair enough, that gets rejected. But if their intention is clear, if they circle the candidate's their entire name, and then put next in the box or in the circle beside the name. Well, it's pretty clear to me that the candidate who got circled with the X in the box, well, that was who they intended to vote for, and the vote should count regardless. If I have been in situations where I have stood up for the ballot cast for a candidate who was not my own candidate, because it was obvious to me the intention was clear. That's who the person wanted to vote for. So we will see what happens. When the votes are being counted on election night, the scrutineers are there. Every candidate can have scrutineers observing the count. And usually there's one for Liberal, one for the Conservative, probably one for the NDP as well. I mean, it depends on the size of how many campaign volunteers you have. But they're observing the vote. And I've noticed things tend to fall along partisan lines. A Liberal will try and get Conservative votes discounted, and likewise, Conservatives try to get Liberals discounted. And I look at it and I try to be objective when I have been a scrutineer. And so long as the intention was clear, okay, they didn't stay right inside the circle, their pen went a little down, but it's clear who they intended to vote for. Anyway, let's see what's being written. And Sharunyan's answering my question. Tamil in heritage, Vanakam. And Danny went to India in his 20s, Malana village in, and I can't pronounce, Himachal Pradesh, or however it's pronounced. Saying evening, everyone's saying hi to each other. Airworks is saying that in that Quebec province riding, that the Liberal won by one single vote. You talk about close. You talk about close. And I, for one, am not going to engage in what I'm hearing a lot of. There are a lot of conservative voices out there claiming that, well, this was stolen, it was rigged, there was fraud, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I don't discount the possibility that that could have happened, but I'm not going to make those accusations without proof, without solid evidence to back it up. Now, is it possible that things went on below the table and there's no evidence? Yes, it's possible, but I'm not going to make those claims absent any hard evidence. And that's what I see happening. I just have to take a little break. Hey, and what is Airworks writing? Yes, but the rule is that you have to follow the rule that if it is outside the line, it is invalid. No, there is no rule about that. What the rule is, according to Elections Canada, is it must be clear what the person marking the ballot, what was their intention in voting. Did they intend to vote for the Liberal candidate? Did they intend to vote for the Conservative candidate or the NDP or the Green? If their intention is clear, count the darn vote. That, that is the letter of the law. But, pen or pencil doesn't matter. So long as the intention of the person marking the ballot is clearly evidenced by what you see on the ballot. If their intention was clear, then Bob's your uncle, count the vote for whoever it fell to. That's democracy. Karunian is writing, last time I went to the airplane was to Putparti, the place where Sai Baba is from. I don't even know who that is. And I forget who said this. Oh, Jean Chrétien. A proof is a proof. What kind of proof? It's a proof. A proof is a proof. I think that was during the Gomery inquiry when it was found out that the Chrétien liberals had been billion-dollar boondoggle, ad scam, all kinds of nefarious actions going on. And that was also a member of his cabinet or a senior member of the Chrétien government had said, I'm entitled to my entitlements. An individual, one of his, I think it was a cabinet minister, started to be taking grief over his large expenses or whatever. And, he said, I'm entitled to them. I'm entitled to my entitlements. And that's why the Chrétien liberals, followed by the Martin liberals, that's why they were eventually put into the wilderness for 10 years. And we had Harper for about 10. Now, looks like the 10-year run of the liberals, now it's going to extend another 3, maybe 4. And we're going to have to put up with Mark Carney and his duplicitous nature of saying one thing, doing another, talks about being Mr., dropping the gloves and getting the elbows up and being all tough. And then he goes down to the White House and he says, oh, we agree with you about the fentanyl, the opiate crisis. Oh, yes, we agree, Mr. President. And, you're transformational. You're fixating on revitalizing the American economy with a strong focus on the American worker, and we bow to that, Mr. President. And we want to have a good relationship like we've always had. Will you lift the tariffs? No, tariffs are staying. I didn't see Mark Carney step up at any time during. He was very polite, very deferential, hoping to, I don't know, hoping diplomacy will win, which it won't with Donald Trump. At the same time, he could if he got his elbows up, if he lived up to his campaign rhetoric, if that was the case, I could see things being worse. I mean, there is some merit to saying that Carney handled himself well, because if he really wanted to go and drop the gloves and go at it with Donald Trump, well, an economy 13 times bigger than our own, a population 8, 9 times bigger than our own, we're going to get crushed. And we need access to the American market for the Canadian economy to flourish. We can talk all we like about, establishing trade partnerships with other nations and everything, but all the other nations are an ocean away. And the US is the world's largest economy. We'd be cutting off our nose to spite our face. Uh, and I like Carney bends over for Trump, volume one. All the elbows up and our relationship with the United States as we've known it is over. That was all just campaign rhetoric to entice stupid voters. People like slogans. Trump supporters would yell, "Drain the swamp, drain the swamp, drain the swamp." And then Carney held his rallies and the liberal idiots yelled, "Elbows up, elbows up." Same mentality, same low resolutions thinking on both sides of the border. Liberals and Trumpers are very similar ultimately at the end of the day. They're ruled by emotion. And emotion, I've said it many times, where ultimately we like to think we're intellectual creatures, but at the end of the day, we all can succumb to emotion very easily. Everyone. Just depends on the issue. COVID, it was an emotionally driven reaction to fear, playing out on the nightly news. Everyone was told to stay in their houses. They watched the images on the nightly newscast. They saw bodies piling up in morgues in Italy, and uh, they saw a mobile mortuary being set up in Central Park, New York. And oh my God, I'm scared. What do we got to do to fix this? Oh my God, I'll do anything. Take it, take whatever you want from me. Just don't let me, I don't want to be hooked up to a ventilator. I don't want to suffocate to death. I don't want to be thrown into an induced coma. And so people became afraid. Those images scared the living crap out of a lot of people. Uh, an individual such as myself, who does not have a television subscription, wants to hear all sides of a debate, who didn't just, if the nightly news said so and so is spreading misinformation, disinformation, I wanted to check them out for myself. Okay, you say that Dr. Luc Montagnier, Nobel Prize winner from France, that he's spreading misinformation. Let me hear what the man has to say, and I'll decide for myself whether I think what he's saying is misinformation, disinformation. And ultimately, I regarded what Dr. Luc Montagnier is saying. To me, it made a lot of sense. But there were politicians and media types who were with no more background in medical science than I have, making the determination for me that I shouldn't listen to that guy. I listened to him. And I listened to Dr. Geert Vanden Bosch and Dr. Byron Bridle of Guelph University. What the heck? The Ontario Ministry of Health paid Byron Bridle's lab at Guelph University hundreds of thousands of dollars because they wanted his expertise on the vaccines under development. So if he was an expert one day, and then you're going to tell me he's a quack the next, that doesn't line up. I listened to what he had to say. And what he said what he was saying made a lot of sense to me, and countless other voices. And now, Carney, I think we are in so much trouble. And then we have Airworks saying that legacy media made it out like Carney was a hero. So frustrating. What happened? That was to get people to vote for the liberals. and it did work. They got a lot of people to vote for the Liberals. One of the things that I've had to reflect on, though, and I think I've said it on my station before, is that my assumption has been, and I think I made perhaps a wrong assumption, that most of the NDP vote, that it moved to the Liberals. And that makes sense from an ideological standpoint, because when you look at the NDP platform and the Liberal platform, they're far more closely aligned than the NDP and the Conservative. So my thinking, and I think a lot of people had this thinking, was that, well, NDP voters are going to gravitate mostly to the Liberal Party. I wonder about that now. I think it's very possible that it might have been as much as an even split, that just as many traditional NDP voters went Liberal and a roughly equal number went Conservative, because Poilievre's message, he didn't have the elbows up, brain dead rhetoric of Mark Carney and the Liberals, but he was preaching a message about making life more affordable for hardworking Canadians. And so if I'm sure there were NDP voters who were able to look past the empty-headed rhetoric and the brain-dead slogans and delved into things and figured, ultimately for me, I want life to be more affordable. I don't want more carbon taxation, which is what Carney is promising. We'll find out more on May 27th when they read this throne speech. Um, and yeah, we've only gotten a temporary reprieve at the gas pump. I just put some gas in at about $1.30 a liter. It had gotten down to $1.20, but it's gone up since the election. And I expect once May 27th rolls around and the Parliament is back in session, I'm expecting to see what Carney promised. And what he promised was to replace the old consumer carbon tax with a new carbon tax that will be levied directly on the oil and gas companies and other carbon producers. And they're going to have to pay it directly to the government. And all they'll do is simply pass the cost on to us, the consumer. So it'll be somewhat hidden, buried in the price, as it were. And I'm expecting we're going to see gas in my area. Before Carney took the carbon tax down to zero, we were paying $1.50 a liter. Then it got down to $1.30 and then down to $1.20. Now it's back up again to $1.30. And I expect by the end of the summer, by the middle of the summer, we're going to be back north of $1.50, maybe even $1.60, 70, maybe $2, because Carney is all in. Canadians have to sacrifice in order to stabilize climate, which is impossible. You will never, I'm not a climate expert. I don't have a background in meteorology, but I'm here to tell you the climate will continue to change no matter how impoverished Mark Carney and his Liberal government make us. So I'm going to keep reading. Airworks is writing that a Liberal friend said, "I'm proud of Carney's intelligence and decency in the face of this situation I will never understand." Yeah. The only time I found Trump to be typical Trump, crass and boorish, was when he trashed over Chrystia Freeland. And that is not something you would normally see in the political arena. I'm sure that in the political arena, there are individuals who hate other individuals, who think, I think she's an idiot, or I think he's a moron. I'm sure that those thoughts are there, but under normal circumstances, you don't see a politician, and certainly not a president or a prime minister, giving voice to them in public and saying that, someone's very stupid, low intelligence, whatever. And there was Trump saying it openly about a woman who, had Mark Carney not come along, she might have been the one. I mean, basically, if they were all in on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the Liberal Party should have chosen Chrystia Freeland. She's held numerous cabinet positions, including finance. She's international relations is her background. She speaks multiple languages. She has on paper, the qualifications, but instead the Liberal Party did what they always do. They won't go for the old white guy. I mean, they've had Sheila Copps before. She ran for the Liberal leadership. No, the only individual who could possibly get me to vote Liberal again, and I have in the past, and I've said it before, is Jody Wilson-Raybould. I have a lot of respect for that woman. Yeah. Anyway, let's see. And Airworks is saying that this individual also said that they thinks that Carney is a class act and very intelligent. He is intelligent. Again, class. Is it a classy thing to hang around with a woman like Ghislaine Maxwell? Is it a classy thing to take high-paying Canadian jobs in Toronto and urging Brookfield shareholders to pull up stakes from Toronto and to relocate down to Donald Trump's old playground of New York City? Is that classy? Oh, maybe. Maybe I've been to New York. Obviously, I spent some years living down there. New York. A lot of people. Well, Mark obviously prefers New York City to Toronto. When he was urging shareholders to move to New York City before he resigned his position to rescue the Liberal Party, before he descended down from his glorious career in central banking and high finance, and he came down to lowly little Canada. I think his puppet master said, "Come on, we want to make Canada the tip of the spear in the Great Reset, Agenda 2030, the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals." And so, Mark, get to work. Go back, go occupy that that little fiefdom called Canada, and get them on side. That's my take on what's happening. No question that Mark Carney is intelligent. He went to, he didn't go to some little Canadian university like Pierre Poilievre. He didn't stay in Canada. No, he went off to Harvard, got a scholarship. He went to Harvard, then he went to Oxford, and I'm here to tell you these scholarships that are offered. I've been trying to do some look. All I can see is that he was given a scholarship to go down to Harvard. I don't know if he got a scholarship to go to Oxford, but they're the elites, the so-called elites. This is the way they co-opt people. A Rhodes Scholarship, other scholarships, to take talented individuals from the horde and to bring them in. And it's good to have, if you want Canada to be part of this Great Reset, Agenda 2030, these 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, you need someone who's been brought into your camp to sell it to little old backward Canada, and unleashing all the tools and money at their disposal to sway the Canadian election, to sway the electorate. One of the things I'm openly wondering how much longer I'll have my YouTube station, because Mark Carney during that election campaign talked about social media platforms. He specifically named X, or Twitter, as being, he called them a bastion of misogyny, hatred toward women, racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, lots of misinformation, disinformation. And he talked openly about the need to place regulations, place limitations on social media sites. And so I'm wondering, how long will it be before I'm accused of thought crime, which is an Orwellian term from his seminal novel 1984. I like what Danny's writing. I fear no man, I fear God. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, as per Proverbs. Don't fear the one who can judge you in this life, but fear the one who has judgment over eternal life. That's what the Bible teaches. And thanks for sharing my birthday. How did you get that? It's not my Facebook? Probably. It is. Coming up on 59. Getting older. Danny saying that Carney is far scarier than Justin because of the same ideologies, but Carney is intelligent, unlike Justin, who is dumber than a sack of hammers. It's the same agenda. They just have someone who's the only thing is Carney is a little out of his depth in terms of the political arena. That's not a criticism on Carney's intelligence. It's just that the political domain is a different beast than being the head of a central bank or the head of Brookfield Asset Management. It's a different milieu. And Carney is learning well. I mean, he started his campaign basically by going down to the United States and going on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. You know, he didn't officially announce his candidacy for the Liberal Party leadership and to become prime minister, but he might as well have. It was that close. And this was Carney getting used to the political arena. Didn't do it in Canada. He wasn't going to go on some rinky-dink little backwater Canadian show. No, he went on to the very popular, millions of viewers, the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, an American. Mark Carney is more of an American than Canadian. Mark Carney does not say process. Mark Carney speaks American. He says process. Well, it's all part of the process. Canadian English speakers, we've become more Americanized. A lot of Canadians I know now say process. We've become Americanized, and Mark Carney is a perfect example of it. Canadians like Polyev, I checked. He says process. But Carney hasn't, or rather, Polyev, went to University of Calgary, not to Oxford, not to Harvard. He stayed in Canada. He's been in the Canadian political scene pretty much his entire adult life, so he's very Canadian. Mark Carney is more of a European, more of an American, and it is what it is. And at the end of the day, politics is something of a blood sport, and if you win, who cares how you did it? We won, you lost, you're crying, haha. And whatever. That's just, politics can get a little on the juvenile side. Danny's saying Carney is a crass act, not a class act, a crass act. And Canada, England, New Zealand, and Australia, I when I looked at everything that was happening during COVID, the lockdowns, the measures that were brought in, New Brunswick at one time was going to deny the unvaccinated the ability to go into a grocery store. Can you imagine that? They tested it. They were looking to see how far they could push things. And it's thanks to the truckers that Canada finally uncoupled itself from that whole agenda. And the retreat that the architects of this 2030 Great Reset, these agendas, the architects of the agenda, it wasn't a retreat, so it was a strategic retreat. They weren't declaring defeat. They just took a strategic retreat. They're planning their next moves. Before it was a pandemic based on a disease. I'm convinced we're going to be facing in the months ahead a new pandemic. It's going to be a financial pandemic. I think we're right on the cusp of it. Carney is trying to play, wants it to look like he's, willing to work with American President Donald Trump. But ultimately, I think it's all about the U.S. is going to go in one direction and Canada is going to go in another. They're going to drill, baby, drill, and we're going to tax, baby, tax. They're going to make energy more affordable for Americans. Canada, we're going to make it more expensive. And when you live in a northern climate like much of this country does, and some of it horrifically so, cheap energy, cheap heat is needed. But what do I know? I thought, like, I looked at the way COVID went down in New Zealand and Australia, the draconian measures. I thought we were bad. I think we were somewhat, we're, our next door neighbor to the south. A lot of U.S. states were not playing the game at all. I can't remember whether it was North or South Dakota, but they didn't lock down at all. and the capital of the whichever state it was, North or South Dakota, they had a parade for their governor, a woman who had refused to institute lockdown orders, and they had a parade for her because they were so thrilled. COVID is still the biggest lie out there that many still buy into. Many still think there was empirical scientific evidence for keeping people 6 feet apart, even after Anthony Fauci admitted that he basically made it up, that there was no data, no trials, no evidence suggesting that 6 feet 2 meters was some magic distance. He just pulled that number out. He just pulled that out of his rear end. But there are people who believe, oh no, that was based on science. Well, show me the science. Well, Anthony Fauci said so, and he is the science. Whatever he says is science. Crazy world, crazy world. Danny thinks we'll both be canceled. There will be lots of us. I mean, if things play out the way I'm anticipating, there's going to be then you shut down discourse, discussion. If I had to break it down, I would say that liberals, by and large, liberal voters, rely on CBC, CTV Global. They love their CBC, and they watch it and they think they're being informed, and they cluck their tongues at those who go to alternative media outlets, go to a YouTube station or to Rebel or Western Standard, True North, the Post Millennial, these alternative sites, Epic Times, and they go, "Oh, that's garbage journalism. I listen to the good stuff. CBC is the good stuff." And likewise, those of us on the right who look at things like get a variety of perspectives from things like YouTube channels or from, Young Turks or, Dave Rubin or a Northern Perspective or Rebel News. We tend to look down and say, the CBC is little more than yellow journalism. It's propagandistic. It's like the old TASS news agency in the old Soviet Union. And we look down our nose at them. And I would guess that, the mainstream, those are liberal voters, and alternative media, social media, that's conservative voters. And what is Carney targeting? He just gave I think it's 140 million more to the CBC, maybe even more than that. I think the number 178 million is coming to mind, but $100+ million more for the CBC. And at the same time, his campaign rhetoric was about placing restrictions on media outlets that are favored by conservatives. So how are you going to spread the word if all you got out there is CBC and its yellow brand of propagandistic journalism? How are you going to spread the word? Yeah. I haven't brought it up for a while, and if CBC News says that 14-year-old kid died of COVID, there won't be a Western Standard or anyone out there to expose the lie that CBC CTV Global reported on that was handed to them by Alberta Health Services when they took a child dying of stage 4 inoperable brain cancer and branded his death as being from COVID in order to get people to get their kids, their healthy kids with healthy hearts, to take something dangerous, or at least with the potential to be dangerous. Sharunyan's writing that anti-white racism is on the rise. There's a lot of self-hatred. They're indoctrinating it into kids in school now to hate the fact that they're of European ancestry, that they're white. You're a bad person. You're part of colonial oppression. You've subjugated other peoples, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as if a person's virtue and everything is somehow tied to the melanin content in their skin, which is total garbage nonsense. And it's annoying, but Danny thinks that the US is heading for a race war. I hope not. Hope not. I love the United States. I have no issue whatsoever with America, with Americans by and large. And I've got someone new here, Dana Rude. Albertans are not going anywhere. We are trying to boot the federal government out. Well, you basically, the difficulty for Alberta is that so much of your wealth is underground, oil and natural gas, and you need markets. You need international markets. Right now, you have one customer, the United States, and they get your product, they get your energy at a discount to the world price because they're the only market. And Canada is refusing so far to build the pipelines needed to get your energy to Tidewater, be it, Northern Gateway, be it, up in Churchill, somewhere on the Hudson's Bay there, or Energy East, get it out to the East Coast. Well, without those pipelines, you're snookered. Now, I don't think genuinely that Alberta in of itself could survive as an autonomous country. I think it would be very challenging. I think the standard of living in Alberta would go way down. I think any experiment with separation would be short-lived, and that Alberta would find itself pretty much forced to join the United States. Now, if it was BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan together, that might work, my opinion. That might work, those three together, because then BC, you have Tidewater, you have access to international markets, but Alberta, Saskatchewan, in of themselves being landlocked, makes it challenging. And Danny pronounces it process as well. It's a English pronunciation versus a American pronunciation. And because how many people say Zed? And you watch my videos, I always say Zed. But even a lot of Canadians say Z, from A to Z. I say from A to Z because I'm Canadian. And it's strange because when I moved back to Canada, when our family moved back to Canada in 1975, when I was 9 years old, I was more Americanized at that point. I'd been through kindergarten grades 1, 2, 3, some of grade 4 in the United States. So I was used to saying foyer instead of foyer. I thought it was funny. I talked like a little New Yorker, and I moved to Canada, back to Canada, where I hadn't been I'd spent a few months back in Canada when I was 3.5, 4. I hadn't been back, except for summer vacations and stuff like that. And now I go to school and the teacher says, okay, we're going to be meeting in the front foyer. And I'm like, the front what? The front foyer. The front foyer of the school. What's a foyer? It's that area in front of the school, in front of the front door. Oh, you mean the foyer? Because that's what Americans say. Uh, and Sherunyan's writing, they tried to take down. Uh, I think we're already in a recession. It just, there's no line about this. I mean, the first sign that you're in a recession is that the economists will deny that we're in a recession. They'll say all the signs point to, the economy is strong. Then the next step is the economists and the talking heads will say that, well, we might have a technical recession. We're going to they'll use the word soft landing. It's going to be a soft landing, very short in duration, just a little, we're going to go down slowly, but it's going to be a soft landing, and then we'll be heading back up again. And when you're in for a long recession is when they finally admit we are in a recession. And now it's going to be a long haul. So, and what's the difference between a recession and a depression? Another famous little bromide. A recession is when your neighbor's out of a job. Depression is when you're out of a job. And Eat Me is here from Montreal, like Danny, saying, are we not already in a recession? We've had interest rates go up. Mortgages are coming up for renewal. People are finding they're having less disposable income. There are all kinds of things that could happen in the capital markets that could really hammer the heck out of Canada. If all of a sudden access to capital, Canada's economy runs right now on borrowed money. And if borrowed money starts getting restricted and we can't access borrowed capital because our economy is tanking, because interest rates are through the roof, well, then what's that going to do to the economy? It's going to hammer the economy. And then what do we get into? We get into Mark Carney's favorite words, quantitative easing, where what happens is the government issues bonds, then the central bank, the Bank of Canada, gets the printing press out. They buy those bonds, and you have inflationary pressure, which leads to higher interest rates still. And it's a vicious cycle. And everyone's saying bonsoir, which is French for good evening. Danny's writing, when MSN, mainstream news, says, this is what we know, they mean this is what we're told to tell you and no more, aka euphemistic language. George Carlin's old favorite line. Well, I've gone on for nearly an hour. It doesn't seem that long. Just some updates on what I'm doing with the station or the channel going forward. I'm going to be doing more shorter videos that I'm uploading. I'm finding that's a better way to get my voice out there. But I enjoy the lives too much to leave them alone. But I'm going to be holding it back to one or two a week. And I'm thinking I normally don't work on Sundays, so Saturday nights are good. And I'm also thinking of Wednesday nights, and I'm thinking of Saturday night kind of being a recap of the week's news, that kind of thing, talking about what's being talked about and live and interacting like I love doing. And I love everyone filling up the live chat. And then Wednesdays, a suggestion Danny has made to me on many occasions, faith-based, because this world is going to, if I'm right, if Danny's right, if others are right, we're going to be needing faith more and more and more and more. And, Danny's favorite quote from the book of Ephesians about, we do not fight battles of flesh and blood. This is spiritual warfare. And we're heading to some dark times. And that's fine. The world has been through it before. We got through it in the past. We'll get through it now. I don't claim to be a prophetic voice, and I'm not here to say that the end is nigh and et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I acknowledge that at some point things are going to come crashing down. At some point, that second coming is going to be on the doorstep. I don't know when it is. I don't expect to know. But I'm already seeing, I talked the other day about the fact that Mark Carney has almost taken on a Christ-like story. He's in the high-flying realm of international finance and central banking. He's, rubbing elbows with just the Ghislaine Maxwells of the world. He's going to Wimbledon, sipping his champagne, eating his strawberries. And then Canada, we're confronted with the devil himself, Donald Trump, and who's going to rescue poor Canada? Who's going to save us from this horrible, evil, satanic Donald Trump down to our south? And who comes down from glory but Mark Carney? Mark Carney is going to save us. Please. But that's the narrative that a lot of Canadians seem to have bought into. And so I'm going to fixate on more spiritual, biblical teaching as best I can. Not an ordained pastor. I don't have a degree in theology or anything like that, but I have read the Bible from cover to cover, and I'm in it pretty much every day. I'm in the Psalms right now. Danny is giving the quote from Ephesians, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And then he writes, put on the full armor of God. And boy, oh boy, we're going to need it. We got through COVID. and the insanity that brought. You can't buy and sell in the marketplace. You cannot be a fully participating member of society unless you get the mark, unless you show your passport. Value papers. We got through that, and it'll probably get worse in the next round. And it's going to be economic. That's what I'm convinced of. So what I'm going to look at on Wednesday, my plan is to look at Jesus, the story in the book of John about Jesus and the woman caught in adultery, and go through that. It's chapter 7 or 8. I think it's the end of 7, beginning of 8. And it's an interesting passage because it doesn't really fit into John's gospel. And I'll talk about that. You know, looks like John's gospel actually reads better. If you lift that out of there, it flows much better. But I'll be talking about that on Wednesday. And SRCX is writing that some humans acquire Christianity at birth, some acquire Christianity through a virus of the mind or social contagion. Whatever the case, no one acquires Christianity at birth. Infants cannot acknowledge anyone as Lord and Savior. And then Denny is saying, oh, real ID in the US. I got to do some more reading on that. I only just came across it the other day. And this is a travel document that's required if you're getting onto a plane, and it can be tied into things like a driver's license. And you have to have this real ID if you want to travel. But I haven't read up enough on it. So yeah, we're moving into the era of this surveillance state, and Americans think they're going to be immune. No. And SRCX is being his usual self, just likes to be a something disturber. And that's the mentality of some. There are 12-year-olds all over the internet. Police state, yeah. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, God bless, and I'll end my videos the way I always like to. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. We'll see you again in another night or two. End stream. God bless.